Imagine a house that feels less like a home and more like a museum of things that should have been forgotten. That is Hillard House, where 18-year-old Barrie MacDonald lives. It is a place of heavy curtains, hushed tones, and a religious atmosphere so thick it feels stifling. Barrie's grandmother, Mrs. MacDonald, runs the house with an iron will. To the grandmother, life is a series of strict rules designed to prevent the return of what she calls bad blood. She views her granddaughter through a lens of fear, seeing not a child, but a reincarnation of Barrie's mother, a woman who was a frivolous actress and, in the grandmother's eyes, a source of profound shame. Barrie grows up in this shadow, feeling the weight of a legacy she didn't ask for. But the tension of the house eventually leads her to a secret. She discovers a hidden garret, a dusty attic space that holds the belongings of her mother. It is here that the silence of Hillard House is broken. Among the old things, Barrie finds a striking red dress. It is vibrant, unapologetic, and completely contrary to the muted, somber world her grandmother has built. This isn't just a piece of clothing, it's an invitation. Finding that dress sparks a rebellion in Barrie. She stops trying to be the quiet, dutiful girl her grandmother demands and begins to embrace the colourful, spirited legacy of the mother she never truly knew. That rebellion leads to a sudden, desperate escape. Barrie slips away from the confines of her room and finds herself at a railway station, lost and untethered. It is there that she meets Iron Somerled. Somerled is a man who commands attention without trying. He is wealthy and magnetic, but he carries a certain cynicism, a weariness that comes from seeing too much of the world. When he realizes that Barrie is the daughter of an old acquaintance, he feels a sense of responsibility toward her. He decides to act as her protector, taking her away from the stifling atmosphere of her childhood and into his own social circle. They arrive at the home of Elaine and Basil Norman. Elaine is a sophisticated woman, a successful author, and she is deeply in love with Somerled. However, the arrival of Barrie changes everything. To Elaine, the young, vibrant girl isn't just a guest, she is a threat. She sees the way Somerled looks at Barrie, and she sees a spark of life that she fears might eclipse her own standing and her romantic hold on him. As the group begins a journey toward the Scottish Highlands, the social dynamics become a battlefield of quiet manipulations. Elaine, driven by a desperate need to maintain control, resorts to a lie. She tells Somerled that Barrie's grandmother has forbidden any contact with her mother, effectively trying to sever the girl's connection to her own history and perhaps making her seem more dependent on Somerled's protection. This deception backfires. Somerled, a man who prides himself on his perception of truth, sees through the manipulation. The rift between him and Elaine is immediate and dramatic. Somerled chooses his duty to Barrie over his friendship with Elaine, and in doing so, he effectively severs his ties with the West siblings. But as the landscape shifts into the rugged beauty of the Highlands, Somerled himself begins to change. The man who entered the story as a cynical observer starts to rediscover a sense of wonder. The wildness of the Scottish landscape seems to mirror a reclamation of his own identity and his connection to his heritage. Meanwhile, Barrie is no longer the sheltered girl from Hillard House. She is transitioning into a woman, navigating the complex, often messy currents of romantic tension and social expectation. One of the most striking moments in their journey takes place in Gretna Green. There is a playful, almost theatrical reenactment of a runaway wedding, a moment of make-believe that feels light-hearted on the surface. But beneath the performance, the tension between Barrie and Somerled is reaching a breaking point. In a moment of intense connection, Somerled secretly purchases a wedding costume for her. It's a gesture that blurs the line between a romantic fantasy and a very real intention. However, the world of respectable society isn't finished with them yet. Elaine and Basil, attempting to restore an order that they feel has been disrupted, orchestrate a plan that is as well-intentioned as it is misguided. They decide to marry Barrie off to Basil. They frame it as a way to protect her, a way to free Somerled from the burden of his perceived obligation to her. They want to settle the chaos by following the rules of social propriety. Barrie, feeling the immense weight of this duty, and perhaps feeling she must sacrifice her own happiness for the sake of the people around her, agrees. She suppresses her true feelings for Somerled, choosing the path of the martyr to satisfy the adults who claim to know what is best for her. The climax of the story arrives when the layers of deception are finally stripped away. The truth comes out, the distance Somerled had maintained wasn't a lack of feeling, but a manifestation of his desire to protect her from the very social pressures that were now closing in. The plan to marry her to Basil is revealed as a web of manipulation, even if it was meant to be for her own good. In a final, decisive move, Somerled refuses to let the social machinery dictate the outcome of their lives. He utilizes the unique, ancient marriage laws of Gretna Green to orchestrate a legal and rapid union between himself and Barrie. It is a triumph of individual agency over social convention. He bypasses the complicated web of family expectations and social standing to claim her in a way that is legally binding and undeniably real. The story concludes with the two of them at Dunelin Castle. They have moved past the restrictive outer life of their youth, the world of masks, performances, and social duties, to find a meaningful, authentic existence rooted in their shared heritage and their actual feelings for one another. When we look back at the story, a few major themes emerge that make it more than just a romantic drama. There is a constant tension between what the book calls the outer life and the inner life. The outer life is the world of Hillard House, of Eineen's sophisticated social manoeuvring, and of the rules that dictate how a person should behave to maintain their reputation. It is the world of performance. Aline performs elegance, Somerled performs cynicism, the characters in the wedding reenactment perform romance. But the inner life is where the truth resides, in the hidden garret, in the red dress, and in the quiet, unshakable desires that eventually drive the characters to break their social contracts. This leads us to the question of heredity versus self-determination. The entire conflict of Barrie's upbringing is based on the idea of bad blood. Her grandmother believes that because her mother was sinful, Barrie is destined to follow the same path. The story argues against this biological fatalism. Barrie's journey is about proving that a person is not merely the sum of their ancestors' mistakes. She takes the vibrant, sinful energy of her mother and uses it to fuel her own identity rather than letting it be a source of shame. She chooses her own character rather than inheriting a reputation. There is also a fascinating look at the role of performance in social life. The characters are often playing roles to protect themselves or to manipulate others. Aline uses her social standing as a shield and a weapon. Somerled uses his cynicism as a way to keep the world at a distance. Even the climax in Gretna Green uses the performance of a wedding to achieve a very real legal end. The book suggests that while social roles are necessary to navigate the world, they can become a prison if they are not aligned with one's true self. Ultimately, the Heather Moon captures a specific moment in history, the transition from the Victorian era to the modern age. We see the old world of moral rigidity, where reputation and social duty were paramount, clashing with the emerging values of the early 20th century, which prioritized individual happiness and authentic connection. The Heather Moon and the key of the rainbow serve as symbols for this awakening, markers of a destiny that isn't written in family trees or social ledgers, but in the courage to live truthfully. It's a story that asks whether we can ever truly escape the shadows cast by those who came before us, or if we can use those shadows to find our own light. For Barrie and Somerled, the answer is found by stepping out of the stifling rooms of the past and into the wild, unpredictable, but ultimately honest landscape of their own making.